Yes, man. Did that dare video from yesterday kick a few people in the jimmies and stir up a hornet's nest? Which begs the question, am I a filthy hypocrite?
Yes, I am!
Not in these threads, I'm not, but anyway. This was an interesting comment. Oh, so you're against the ban on pornography, but you still object to V's hentai game because it's degenerate. What exactly am I missing here? Context and power, I would say. And no, this doesn't belong in an episode of Stop Being So Stupid. It's a question, them not being so silly. It's a fair one. On face value, I do seem a tad hypocritical. So with that being said, let me explain. And this will be a mashing together of some points that I've assembled over the last, say, 18 months, give or take, so I probably won't be saying anything new to my many long-term followers. Being a content creator is a bit like a politician in that sense. You have to bring in new people on board with something interesting, yet that won't fly over their heads, yet also keep the older ones entertained in the process. And God forbid you try and change positions on anything after you've made a reputation for your position and you don't make the change visible and justify it. Then out comes the labels of grifter, like a fat kid's appetite in a pie shop. Recently, a bunch of people were watching my content on a live stream, which triggered some Eastern European hippie who did not take too well to my anti-American foreign policy stance, and said my content is difficult for new people to get into. Yeah, it's been a while and I've made several hundred videos. If I rehashed all or even most of my points in any video that's even vaguely political, well, all of my videos would sound like a loop and be at least 20 minutes long. There's already someone on YouTube who does that. He's called Tim Pool. You may have heard of him. But before I go any further here, I want to address the plebs who are ever so slightly perturbed with what I said in my previous video. And yes, I did just call you plebs. Cry more, I stand by it. Now, one trend I have noticed that's disturbingly thrown around a lot in this mindless faction war politics that is democracy, where everything is either communist or fascist. My good lord, I am bored already. Is this annoying tendency to associate a tactic with a faction and therefore deem the use of all said tactics as irredeemable. It's like the genetic fallacy replaced with tactics instead of information. I hate the politicization of everything. It's all so tiresome. And when a bunch of people were trying to explain to me what dev meant and saying I was doing something the left would do, I'm going, first off, no. Secondly, why? I wasn't trying to denigrate centrist people, whatever the hell that means at this point. My point was, leftists who are too chicken shit to fly under the banner of leftists will hide behind the label of centrism, being the floating corpses that they are, and drift with the tide going leftward. I would have thought this was obvious when I said the most limp-wristed of right-wingers will at least call themselves center-right. They will show the distinction. Whereas those who solely use the label centrist are the corpse floaters. I can't make it any simpler than that. Again, observation. The people who were center-right, who got mad at me, I was there thinking, why are you mad? I did have a go at you. You're fine. It's very strange. But anyway, let me get back to the comment. Oh, so you're against the ban of pornography, but you still object to V's hentai game because it is degenerate. What exactly am I missing here? Now, previously I've said one of my biggest gripes with content creators, and it's not their fault, it's just the nature of the business, is for the most part they tend to advocate for the worldview based on their own perception of how they want the world to be. Now this is far more common among the right than the left. The right naturally is more individualistically orientated, even though they don't really like talking about what would hold the collective together aside from, say, free market principles, which doesn't work nearly as well as they would like to think. Adam Smith was wrong, Friedrich List was correct. Whereas the left tend to be more collectivistic, but are more driven by what they wish they could turn society into. This is also why they come across as anti-human social engineers who seem frankly batshit insane. But we are individualistic after all, and the right projects this "wouldn't you like a world where I am your neighbor" kind of a vibe, which if you're trying to win over the audience is a good tactic. They also seem principled people by doing this because they live their principles. They seem honest and trustworthy. Again, good tactic. Where the trickiness kicks in, though, is much like the politicians, is when they try to move their positions, even when circumstances would indicate it is wise to do so, yet their principles and audience sort of keeps them anchored in positions. We're not static. No one ever gets better without having their positions challenged and changed or adapted when the circumstances dictate they are necessary. Much like a machine, increased code processing power makes for a more efficient machine. Humans must do the same thing as well. So the comment in question referred to a previous time where I said I would not grant the state power to vanquish pornography, but yesterday I said I would clamp down on V's capacity to export his game. Now, recall what I said before, there's two sets of power and two options when it comes to action. There's a mass power and a top-down power, enabling and disabling. Either state or church power enabling or disabling the unsavory, or the masses enabling it via excessive engagement or disabling it via aversion or discipline. Now, in the previous example where I advocated against banning it via the state, in that hypothetical, I was not in the governing apparatus. I was against it because I do not trust the current crop of cretins in power, hence why I'm against giving them any more power because I believe they would abuse it. Whereas in yesterday's hypothetical, I am in the governing apparatus and I trust myself with that kind of power because I deem myself far more worthy than today's lowbrow wankers who call themselves politicians. And yes, I can already hear the cliche cries of, oh, you think you are so much better. That's what every tyrant thinks. They always think they are so much better, more moral, and far more resistant to corruption. Yeah, but here is a difference. I don't want power. That is a hypothetical. That's usually the behavior from people who seek power. I don't. My whole reason for hating democracy and wanting monarchy is I want to get power away from the idiots and the plebs because they have no business being involved in choosing the head of state. I think that is insane. The point I'm trying to make here is this. If you were sane, your positions have to be conditional. Like, let me ask you all a question, especially if you're the state-hating libertarian type. What side do you err more on? Hating the state for its potential abuse of power or your love of freedom? And if you hate the state, what does it say about the kind of people that your system selects for office? Maybe it attracts the kind of people that you end up hating. And your desire for freedom, what does it say about the morality and temperament of your fellow man if you choose this side? Now, what happens in the case of the inverse? I'll give an example. Let's say you lived in a place where alcohol was recently introduced. Now, at first, people drink, it's not so bad. People have a good time, and getting drunk is next to non-existent. Then, after a while, you're seeing signs of the drunkenness, but it's still not too bad. But then it starts to ramp up to the point where it's getting kind of worrying and it's becoming a detriment to the social fabric. Now, what has happened here is the removal of shame. This is not something people can get back in a moment's notice. When the problems get too much, the masses will look towards a power to course-correct ship trajectory, which is the state. This is inevitable. And I get that people don't like that, but you're always going to have to choose between these two powers and its potential wrongdoings, be this the abuse of power from the state or abuse of freedom from the ill-disciplined masses. Abuse of power from the state just happens to be feared more because it has the monopoly on violence. It also just happens that our state is not incentivized or rewarded for being moral, which is why our politicians have the reputations they do, and probably why we have such an aversion to state power. Ultimately, though, you also have to consider the circumstances and culture of the people you listen to and their history. They will most certainly use them in the justification for what they believe. Take, for example, if you put myself, Sargon V, and Dev in a room. Now, Sargon, being the Englishman, favoring parliamentary apparatus, though I suspect given his journey against liberalism, he might end up becoming a monarchist at some point, though he is no fan of the current king. I imagine he laments the loss of the British Empire. One can hardly blame him. V, Eastern European, he's lived under the Iron Curtain. He hates centralized power and is more skeptical of it than damn near anyone else that I know. And given his history, his opinion is most certainly understandable. Whereas myself, yeah, I'm not exactly opposed to some kind of despotic ruler.
I prefer the term autocrat.
Or that's a better term as well. And why do I favor this?
If you want to see the fate of democracies, look out the windows.
Precisely. And Dev, well, we won't get a word out of Dev because he's too busy being on his knees kissing the feet of the North American state apparatus with V's foot eyeing his ass.
That is such a good point, isn't it?
That it is indeed, V. Cheers for watching, and once again, I apologize for nothing.